Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Aloha! It is a pleasure to be with you at the Third World Parliament on Spirituality. What I've learned that I want to share with you today is that the quality of the agreements we make, whether conscious or unconscious, is directly proportional to the quality of our lives, and especially to our relationships, including our relationship with ourselves. Because all life is sacred, all relationships are sacred. When we apply this in the business world, it becomes practical spirituality. In 1985, shortly after my honeymoon, and a few years after my husband, Glenn, and I were doing what some might call conscious business consulting, we invited some of our clients and fellow business owners to come to our home to explore this question. How can we support one another in living our highest values in all aspects of our lives, and especially at work where we spend most of our time? At that very first gathering of what became known as the Geneva Group, we began developing a set of agreements to guide us to live those values. That forum, without any membership or obligation of any kind, continued to meet for a full day every month for the next 20 years. We opened each meeting by reading the agreements aloud and talking about how they were positively impacting our lives and the lives of those we worked with and lived with. As we evolved, the agreements evolved. The revolutionary agreements are my version of the essence of those Geneva Group agreements. They self-organize into what I call 3 pillars of a good life. And you can see those 3 pillars in this banner behind me: truth, acceptance, and gratitude. Where truth is being the truth of who you are, your authentic self. Acceptance is accepting others for who they are in this moment. And gratitude, well, gratitude is that feeling and expressing appreciation for every precious moment of our sacred life on this beautiful planet. So what are these agreements that have guided thousands of us to become more successful in relationships at home, at work, and in our communities? In the area of truth, they are: I agree to live my mission, to speak my truth with compassion, to look within when I react, and to keep doing what works and change what doesn't. I'm so excited to tell you about some of the results that people have shared with me from applying these agreements, and I'll focus on the business world because that's the topic area I'm in for you today. And you know, in business, we love results. So let's start with the director for systems and operations at a Fortune 50 company who was so stressed out because his organization was not performing to standard. A consultant gave him a copy of the Revolutionary Agreements book. Inspired, he engaged his team to create their own agreements. And later that year, he wrote, "We have been functioning as a cohesive team with our new agreements for 7 months now. And to say that this core organization has turned itself around would be an understatement. I look back and remember upper management laughing at my 1-year goal. Back then, they did not know about the power of using the agreements. I can say that I am in love again with my career and assert that the agreements are the best tools for stress reduction I have ever found." Well, I love that word love. The second agreement, in truth, is I agree to speak my truth with compassion. So here's what Carol shared from the second edition of Revolutionary Agreements. One of my highest values in a job is working as part of a team. I took a job that seemed great, paid well, and used my skills, but I worked totally alone. I rarely saw my boss, let alone anyone else. As time went on, I became more and more uncomfortable, yet was not able to face the issue within myself. One day, my boss came in and suggested that I seemed unhappy and perhaps the position was not a fit for me. I was immediately fearful of losing my job and responded, "No, I am happy here." My boss gently suggested that I take some time to think about it. I went home and reflected on what had happened. My boss was speaking my truth for me. The next day I called her and said, "You're absolutely right. I'm not happy here." We agreed to end the working relationship. I spent 2 weeks training my replacement, and that was my happiest time there because I was working with someone. Now I have a different job, working with a team for a common goal, and I love it. There's that word again. I learned that speaking my truth with compassion is not just telling someone else, but acknowledging the truth to myself. The third agreement is I agree to look within when I react. Gail lives in a neighborhood of 24 homes. They share common food gardens and a multi-use community building. For more than 20 years, they have begun their many community business meetings by reading their agreements aloud. Here's what Gail said. Since working with the agreements, I notice I have fewer reactions to differing opinions, and I'm able to more quickly stop myself before laying blame on another. The agreements remind me to look within for the source of my issue. Once I discover that source, my reaction usually dissipates. Then I can relax and respect our differences. And to wrap up this pillar on truth, I agree to keep doing what works and change what doesn't. During the time I was building a hugely successful business, one of my business partners said to me one day, "Isn't our work so easy, fun, and rewarding?" Well, fun, yes, I got to work with her, and rewarding, definitely, because we were literally saving people's lives and making a lot of money doing it. But easy? No, it was hard. And I told her that. She replied, "Really? I think it's easy." Well, later that day, I thought about how she and I did the same work, yet she thought it was easy and I thought it was hard. I realized that my whole life, although I always enjoyed my work, I thought it was hard. After all, I was taught and proud of being a hard worker. In that moment, I decided it was time for me to experience that work and life was easy. I knew a little bit about how we create neural pathways in our brains by reinforcing the same thoughts over and over and again, creating kind of a rut in our brain. And now I was in a rut. So I also knew that if I didn't reinforce those thoughts, eventually that pathway would weaken and maybe even separate. So what would I rather believe? That work was easy. The next day, I decided to begin creating a new neural pathway by reinforcing the thought that everything was easy. I opened the sliding glass door to my lanai and whoosh, I said out loud, "That was easy." I cracked an egg into the frying pan. "That was easy," I said out loud. I continued to notice and reinforce the thought easy. I wrote a blog about it, and one of my readers sent me this button.
That was easy.
So now I had another voice of reinforcement. After only about a week, seeing and experiencing easy had taken hold. And since then, if I ever feel like something is hard, I consider whether an old habit was showing up, or perhaps whatever was feeling hard was simply not right for me at this time. So, moving on to the area of acceptance. I agree to listen with my heart, to respect our differences, to resolve conflicts directly, and to honor our choices. I won't have time today to share a story for each of these agreements, but if you'd like, you can read the results that people have shared with me at revolutionaryagreements.com, or you can read the second edition of my book. So let me just share this one story in this particular pillar of acceptance. It's by Kathy. I own a rental property on the river in Estes Park, Colorado. When it is not rented, I like to go there myself to enjoy the quiet beauty of the surroundings. Recently, I invited a friend to join me for a weekend, and we went up anticipating quiet walks, reading, and good conversation. When I arrived, I noticed that the owners of the property next door had a new tenant. There were lots of cars parked outside, and it appeared there was a party in progress. The evening wore on, and instead of winding down, the party got even rowdier. The next day, my guest said she was fine until 2 a.m. when I heard the party going on next door. That did it. I decided I would call the owners of that house. I would call the owners and let them know just what kind of tenant they had and the disturbance that they were making. After all, I had my future tenants to think of, and it could affect my rental business. Ironically, I had just read Revolutionary Agreements, which I had shared with my friend. Suddenly, the agreement, I agree to resolve conflicts directly, popped into my head. This was my opportunity. I walked next door, rang the doorbell, and waited until a young man answered. He was slightly disheveled and looked like he'd been up all night, which wasn't surprising. I asked, "Is this what I can expect every night?" He was most apologetic and replied that this was an unusual occurrence. They were celebrating the birthdays of 3 people and chose to have one big party. He assured me it would not happen again. The agreements are so valuable to me because they bring so many things into my conscious awareness. Through the use of just one agreement, I was able to resolve this conflict directly, easily, and amicably for both parties without unnecessarily involving the owners. I realized how often we tell others instead of speaking directly to those with whom we can resolve our issues. And I'm grateful for this positive experience of putting the revolutionary agreements into action. And then finally, in the area of gratitude, I agreed to give and receive thanks, to see the best in myself and others, to look for blessings in disguise, and to lighten up. By the way, you can get your own free poster at freeposternow.com so that you don't have a person sitting in front of what you might want to read. Okay. So in this third pillar, Lori, an executive coach and therapist, wrote, "One of my business clients was concerned about losing productivity at work. At closer look, we discovered that the root of the problem was at home. His insistence that his wife support him by acting in ways he deemed right was draining his energy. I suggested he use the agreement to see the best in myself and others, and requested, why don't you talk with your wife only about what she's doing right over this next week? He did so, and the result was nothing less than transformative. Both his relationship with his wife and his productivity at work experienced a dramatic turnaround." And finally, I must share what Reverend Marty, the senior minister of a large UCC congregation, wrote about the final agreement. "One day, in the midst of a particularly packed schedule of back-to-back meetings and deadlines, I was checking my iPhone calendar, my computer calendar, and my day timer, trying to make sure I wasn't going to miss any appointments or overlook something important. My cell phone rang. I noticed it was my son calling, and he rarely contacts me by phone. My heart sank as I anxiously answered. 'Hi, Mom,' he said. 'Levi wants to say something to you.' Levi, my grandson, was just learning to talk the last time I had seen him, so I had never talked with him on the phone. 'Hi, Oma,' he said, clear as a bell. 'I just pooped in the potty.' It certainly put it all in perspective. Perhaps it was God again calling to say, 'Marty, lighten up.'" First and foremost, these agreements are agreements with ourselves. Practicing these agreements ultimately leads to the one agreement, which is I agree to be myself with a capital S, to signify that we are a divine gift from our Creator, and the way we live our lives is a gift to all creation. May the agreements that resonate with you serve you and those whom you serve with love. Namaste.